Hi everyone, welcome to the Decentralized Voices podcast. My name is Daria and I'm happy to have Bhaji Illuminati, CEO of Centrifuge. Bhaji has rich experience in scaling early stage companies into market leaders and an innovative approach to bring together traditional finance and decentralized tech. She's definitely a role model, especially for women building their careers in DeFi. In this episode, we'll explore the tokenization of real world assets, the transformation of global financial systems, Bhaji's journey from CMO to CEO, and what's ahead at the upcoming RWA Summit in Cannes. Enjoy the conversation and don't forget to share it with your friends. Bhaji, I'm happy to have you today. Please share a bit about your professional background and about your way to the RWA rabbit hole.
Yeah, absolutely. So nice to meet you, and thank you so much for having me. Really excited to jump into the conversation and to join this podcast. So, my background is always early stage tech, usually the first person on the go to market team, working really closely with the founders to bring technology into antiquated industries and to create new categories. That's spanned a variety of different industries, from supply chain finance to marketing tech to product tech. And what has remained the same across those different industries is this need to educate markets on a new way that things can be done and how they can be enhanced and improved with technology. I worked with the Centrifuge founders back in the day, about 10 years ago, at the company they founded previously, which was Talia. Worked with them for about 5 years there and stayed very close on their journey. When they left Talia to start Centrifuge, it intrigued me around the power of blockchain, the power of crypto, and how we can solve a lot of the challenges that we saw in supply chain finance with blockchain primitives and crypto rails. So I was always very impressed, and it really clicked and spoke to me that this is the most sophisticated and transformative technology, fully decentralized, that is able to transform the most antiquated and robust and important industry of finance. And this whole new level of tech meets process and opportunity for change and for evolution. When they reached out to me and asked me to come and join as the CMO to help bring the company to the next level and take Centrifuge outside of the halls of the crypto community that we had fostered and developed and strengthened over the years, and take it to more mainstream adoption and understanding and awareness, for me it was a very easy decision and something that I was really excited about. I started as the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, focused on category creation, education, thought leadership, events, really simplifying the message of how do we take this deep technical language and how do we translate it and make it more understandable and appealing to a wider audience. And then added on a couple functions slowly over the last 2.5 years. So about a year in, I took over the sales team as well and started doing all go-to-market, thinking through the funnel on the TradFi asset manager side in terms of which asset managers we want to bring in, tokenize, help them manage and distribute their funds, matching that on the DeFi distribution and investor side in terms of who is interested in getting access to these tokenized funds. So really looking at both sales, BD, and marketing across both of those distinct audiences. And then in February, so about 6 months ago, stepped into the CEO role. So for me and for Centrifuge, that was a pretty natural evolution of the work that we had done over the past 2.5 years to really legitimize and bring more awareness to Centrifuge and to the industry more broadly. Work that's needed ahead for Centrifuge. So taking us from really deep focus on the protocol level development, creating the best tech, getting the tech audited, having all of these building blocks and these core fundamental strategies in place, to then the focus being, now we have the tech, we have the regulatory tailwinds, we have the interest and excitement from the institutional audience, and what we need going forward is how do we scale that? How do we get adoption for it? How do we bring it to market in the most effective and impactful way? So that's a lot of our focus right now, and a lot of the strength of my background and what I've been focused on historically, and applying that to some of the key strategies that we're implementing and putting in place for this next level of growth for Centrifuge.
You're one of the few women in crypto leading a company as CEO. What's the challenge for you as a woman working in this field? Can you share, please?
Yeah, so my advice there, and I get asked this question often, is it's really the way that you bring yourself and present yourself in the room. So if you really internalize the imbalance, and if you look around and if you feel that that is a disadvantage for you, that can impact how you represent yourself in the room. And then how you represent yourself in the room is how others see you. I've always worked in male-dominated industries. I've always been the only woman in a room, and as I became more senior in my career, that became even more evident. But for me, I've never seen that as a disadvantage. I've seen it as an advantage because I have a unique leadership style. I have a unique communication style. I have a deeper level of empathy where I'm able to build consensus with groups around me and listen and learn in a way that doesn't lead with ego. And I think that as a key management characteristic and way that I presented myself in the room has given me the strength to be really proud of the unique perspective that I bring, and then has given the people around me that level of confidence because I have that confidence in myself. So my advice there is come into the room and be confident and be proud and be unapologetically yourself. Don't think of yourself as a marginalized group or not deserving the seat at the table, or deserving the seat at the table because of being a woman and not because of the merit, but instead recognize the strength that you bring in yourself and be really proud of that differentiation as a part of who you are and why you belong in that room. So I think now as CEO, I don't think of myself as, I want to be the best woman CEO. I think of myself as I want to be the best CEO. And how do I kind of look around me, and how do I look at all the great mentors and coaches and external founders and leaders that I've seen, not compare, oh, this person's great because they have X, Y, Z going for them, but this person's great. And I want to take that and I want to be that and implement that as well. So I think it's the only thing you can control is how you receive and perceive information. You can't control how others are around you. So my advice is don't have a negative frame by which you see others and see yourself. Have a very positive frame in that regard, and then others will think the same. I'm really looking for in my hiring and recruiting and going outside of my way to try to bring women in. And I'm proud that we've got a number of phenomenal female engineers, and we have diversification of gender across many different functions. And I think just the more we see that, the more comfortable more we'll be, and the more recognition that this is a viable path and a welcoming place and a really great opportunity to grow and expand and evolve your career will strengthen and have a outsized effect on how we're growing as an industry overall.
Thank you very much, girls. Confidence, yeah, confidence in the room is the best strategy to present yourself and to be a leader.
Yeah, someone told me very early on in my career, we had public speaking coaches back at Talia, and they said there's things that you can do in your body language, the way you sit, the way you present yourself. When you walk into a room, are you big? And when you're sitting around the table, are your shoulders up? And are you making eye contact with everyone? And from the physical state to the emotional state, that really comes across in the way that people perceive and value and respect you. One advice that I got early on as I was thinking through how I can start to implement those practices more often is someone was like, before you go on stage or before you go into a room, actually go into the bathroom or go into a private space and put your arms up and look in the mirror and be really loud and be really bold and be really crazy just alone by yourself in that room. And even going through those actions just lifts you up and lightens you, and then that comes forth into the room that you go into. So it's feels very uncomfortable, feels very unnatural, but really does have an impact on how you yourself are perceived and how others around you interact with you more directly.
Can you please share about your transition from CMO to CEO at Centrifuge? Because you mentioned at the beginning shortly, but let's go deeper. How does your vision impact the company and its direction and its global domination, let's say?
Global domination. I like it. Yeah. So, my role from the beginning at Centrifuge wasn't ever exclusively marketing, which is part of the reason why it made sense for me to step into the CEO role, is that I was always somewhat focused on both growth and marketing, go to market, but then also strategy and operations. So, how do we working really closely with Lucas, our previous CEO, and the rest of the founding and the leadership team to internalize the external factors from competitors, from VC, from the market trends and evolutions more broadly, and take that into the strategy that we're developing internally, the goals that we want to set, the roadmap that we want to hold ourselves accountable for, and then the operating plan of how we actually create the execution roadmap and operationalize that strategy. So from an early stage, and a lot of people ask me, the transition from CMO to CEO, but I think the way that you see yourself as a marketing leader as well, if you have marketers on this group, is that it's always been very important for me to have marketing as a strategic driver of growth more broadly within the company, and not just a siloed marketing function, which in some companies can be seen more as a order taker or very tactical function within the organization. So marketing has always had a seat at the strategy table and has always been more focused on marketing, which is brand awareness, brand recognition, kind of broad positioning and strategy development for Centrifuge overall. And then strategy in terms of differentiation and positioning and where we are today, where we want to be in the future. And then operations in terms of how we can set incremental goals along that longer term North Star roadmap and ensure that the whole entire team is orienting around these specific goals. So for me, the biggest change was just kind of officially stepping into that role. So going from just the growth at the marketing side to zooming out and looking more holistically at the entire ecosystem. And as part of that, what that means for the change of the Centrifuge strategy and the evolution of the work that we're doing is that we've been, as I mentioned before, very historically focused on just the tech roadmap, getting those foundational building blocks in place, which is still critically important. And the only reason we're able to focus on growth now is because of the excellent tech foundation that we have. So my focus is, okay, how do we maintain that strong roadmap and that ambitious plan on the tech side, but then surround it with an ecosystem that drives adoption of that technology? So not just the mindset of, if you build it, they will come, but if you build it, and then if you build this infrastructure and ecosystem around it, and this launch pad for different apps to be built on top of it and different use cases to be developed, leveraging the technology and white labeling the solution. And the biggest evolution has been the more holistic focus on how do we take what we have and how do we create an ecosystem around it to broaden the adoption and create that flywheel to ultimately scale usage of the Centrifuge technology.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sure that CEOs with marketing background or with marketing education or some experience in marketing, they see the picture like in more broad way, and they can be more successful because they see tech side, business side, and marketing side, and they can combine it. It's really cool to see this holistic picture and to understand not only how you build this product, but how you can promote it and how can you build this ecosystem and attract partners through brand awareness, through all the things more human oriented.
A key question I always ask is, who are we building this for? And there's a driver of the strategy now, which is that we have our long-term vision, we have our North Star that we're all orienting towards, but we're ensuring that the prioritization of the incremental development along the way is built for a specific user in mind. So we want to recognize where the market is, who the customers are, who the primary decision makers are on both sides of the marketplace, and then ensure that what they're looking for today and the pain points that they have right now is what our solution solves. Because you can, build the 5-year, 10-year vision from now, build the beautiful future that we're all working towards. But if the market's just not ready for it, then timing can be the death of the product. So it's very important to balance those two time horizons as well and ensure that you have that the dual strategy in terms of what you're building and who you're building it for. And then to your point around marketers moving into the CEO role, I think it is really interesting because marketing is one of the only functions that it has such a broad skill set in terms of marketers. So you can have an ops person, you can have an analyst, you can have a designer, you can have a campaign manager, content creators. So people who are phenomenal writers and storytellers, people who are like very operational in nature. There's so many different skill sets of marketers in a way that's not necessarily as broad or diverse as in other functions. So I think it's always interesting when someone says, what's the most important characteristic of a marketer is it varies so much based on what you're focused on, who you're focused, what type of company you work at, what size and stage your company is, who you're selling into. And then a marketing leader who recognizes and can wear all those different hats and has had experience across the board. Growing up in that career trajectory gives you a really unique opportunity to have a very diversified skill set, which then helps in the transition to a more operational or a more broad leadership role, because you're able to understand the importance of great process and great tech and the various components across the organization in a broader way across the whole company rather than just a focused way across the marketing team.
Yeah, I'd like to share your words with everyone in Web3. Many people perceive marketers like hands, like very tactical, as you mentioned, very tactical roles, and they don't see this like huge potential of people who have this really rich and like big experience in operations, in creative things, in the more like tech sides. So that's, I think, should be shared and promoted.
Good. Love it.
So can you please share your insights on scaling early stage startups into market leaders?
Yeah, absolutely. So speed matters, but when you're moving in the right direction. So set your goals, set your strategy, and then have a hierarchy where you are mapping the work that you're doing to the intended outcome that you're trying to achieve. So what I've done in terms of that hierarchy and the operating cadence is you have annual goals that don't change that often, and they can be pretty broad around revenue generation and retention metrics and pretty consistent year over year. You have quarterly initiatives and strategies that you're testing and trying that you believe will help you achieve those goals. And then you have 1 or 2 or 3 week tactics that roll up to those initiatives. So you know what your goals are, you know what the initiatives that you're testing to help you achieve those goals are, and then you know what those tactics and those smaller level activities are that feed up into those initiatives. So the reason I set that framework is that it goes back to the speed matters, but if you're heading in the right direction. So once you align on the leadership level of what is the right direction, what are we trying to achieve as a group, then you can give autonomy and empowerment to the team level to focus on outcomes. So what can we do to move quickly to try to achieve those goals? The velocity is very important in the early days because you have to test and you have to learn. When you're coming into an early stage startup, especially when you're creating a new category, there is no playbook. There's no set way that things have always been done, that they should be done in the future. So the early days are, how do we rapidly test, learn, and iterate? And how do we double down on the things that are working? And how do we scrap the things that are not working? So operating with a low sense of ego and a high sense of data to drive the decision making is a recipe for success in early stages, but then also as you scale as well. Also working really scrappily, having a high output to people ratio. So folks have always been very surprised with the team size that I've had in marketing because we're hosting, globally renowned huge events and we're putting out magazines.
I will ask you about it.
Yeah, we're doing a podcast and we're moving really quickly and we're creating a brand that's much bigger than who we actually are. And a lot of that is done on a very, very small budget. So I always encourage people of like, don't, especially in the early days, don't proactively hire for the roles that you think you're going to have, because the team can often produce a lot more than you initially expect from them. And oftentimes that leads to higher morale and stronger culture, because everyone has more fulfillment, they have more excitement, they recognize that the work that they're doing is really important. And because of that hierarchical goal setting structure, know how the work that they're doing is tying back to the outcomes that you're trying to achieve as a company. So keep operations and budget lean, really empower the people that you have, really share the goals very broadly within the organization, over communicate so that everyone understands the strategic impact of the role that they have, and way that the work that they're doing ties to the larger, longer term initiatives that the company has more broadly. And then, yeah, I mean, there's always this like transition from when you're, from a company strategy or from like a team or a function strategy. You need to test, you need to learn, you need to try everything under the sun, you need to figure out what works. And then the key there is that when you do figure out what works, then double down on that and focus on it. So you need to have that recognition that like, chaos is beautiful in the early days, but then focus is important in the scale up days, and recognizing what those key indicators are of when it goes from the test, learn, iterate stage to the double down and scale stage.
Thank you very much. So, as you mentioned, you co-created initiatives like Tokenized Asset Coalition and RWA Summit. Please share, how did you manage to gather all these people under one roof, like all these VC managers, infra builders, traditional financial institution representatives? So, why and how?
When I first joined Centrifuge, which was 2023, VAs were still very, very early. And there were a couple key folks that were really focused on education and community development and ecosystem building for the category overall. So what I realized running marketing and more broadly for the Centrifuge strategy is that we can only get broader education and awareness if we all kind of band together to make this category bigger than just a few folks working on edge cases. So we were really close with key partners like Circle, like Coinbase, like Aave, and then even competitors in RWAs like Goldfinch, like FedEx in the early days. We would have a lot of conversations, very informal communication channels where we're all sharing ideas, providing feedback, meeting up at events, and doing our work independently to drive the category forward. So what we wanted to do is then actually take that, capture that, and turn it into something more formal. So that's where we created the Tokenized Asset Coalition. And what it is a coalition with the intention of onboarding the next billion users and the next $1 trillion to crypto through real world assets. Doing that through events, through education, through community development, and through legitimizing the category more broadly by bringing all these folks and banding together to combine resources in consistent and streamlined education. So we created the coalition. That is a digital community where we're pushing out social, blog, podcast content on a weekly and bi-weekly basis. And what we realized is that the crypto industry overall is such an events-oriented community since everyone works remote. And going to all these events, we were going to dozens a year, from, permissionless and mainnet and the large ones to some of the smaller scale ones. We weren't able to effectively go deep enough into the conversation around real world assets. So there would be one panel and maybe one happy hour and just a couple things for RWAs at each event. But as the industry was developing and evolving and maturing so quickly, we felt that there was a need for much deeper conversations as it relates to RWAs. So not just, what are they and why are they important, but what are the regulatory considerations across various jurisdictions, and what's the infrastructure that's still needed? What's needed from an allocator's perspective to actually invest in RWAs? Really going deep on all of these topics. So in September 2023, we hosted the inaugural RWA Summit in New York. And we did exactly that. So we kept the conversations very focused. We kept the room very small and intimate. So only 250 people. Every application is reviewed, and we're ensuring that they have a mandate towards tokenization. They're coming to equally contribute as takeaway from the conversation, very senior in their role so they can drive decisions and advocate for tokenization and RWAs more broadly. And then finally, that there's a mix of TradFi and traditional finance folks, and then DeFi and crypto founders, so that we're bringing these people together and not just, working within an echo chamber of the folks that all have the same beliefs and the same challenges that we all do. RWA Summit year 1 was very successful, and then we scaled it to 5 last year, and then we're on track to do another 5 this year. We have our flagship event in New York. That's a standalone event in the fall. And then we do RWA summits along other major industry conferences. So we'll have our next one next week alongside ECC and Cannes. So for us, from the marketing standpoint, it was excellent because it still does allow us to bring all the folks that we care about on the BD and the go-to-market side together so that we can facilitate these really incredible and deeper conversations. So really strong value add on the BD and the sales side. On the marketing side, we're able to shape the narrative of the key challenges, the key opportunities, the key focus areas for RWAs, bring people together to share insights and knowledge on that, record all of that content, and then turn it into blog content and video content and content that fuels the marketing engine for many, many months to come. On the executive strategy side, it allows us to build relationships with the most senior people at these companies that we're selling into, because they're the ones that we're bringing in to speak. So we can work closely and drive the conversation forward with their team, but then we also know the CEO and we know the executive leadership team. So it brought us into the fold in that way. And then for the market, just really helped legitimize and bring a lot of focus to real world assets. So for us, it's been a huge driver of the industry, the category, and the position that Centrifuge plays within RWAs overall.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for great explanation. And I want to ask you about your documentary recorded from last year's RWA Summit in Brussels.
Absolutely, yeah. So we realized that we were getting so much alpha and so much incredible insights from these events. And last year, for our event strategy, we were in Austin in the beginning of the year, and then Dubai and Singapore and Brussels, and then New York in the end of the year. So every couple months across major hubs and jurisdictions, we had 250 people together talking about real world assets. So we realized that was a unique opportunity to capture video content of what's happening right now in that jurisdiction of that moment of time, considering global trends and regulations, and what can we take away and then ultimately take a step back and learn from and view the evolution of the industry. So at every event, we did 10 to 15 different video recordings, and then we turned that into a 45-minute documentary of the state of and evolution of RWAs over the course of 2024. Us, there was a couple things. One is that we really wanted to show the scope of smart people focused on this intersection. So we brought in VCs, we brought in asset managers and allocators, we brought in crypto founders, we brought in thought leaders and regulators, and we wanted to ask them different components of how we solve the challenges ahead of us and show the world that there's really smart people across every different category that are all focused on identifying and solving these challenges. More generally, education is a huge part of our strategy, and it always has been, because we're still so early. There's so much to teach varying levels of the audience as we expand bigger and bigger. So from, early days where the education is targeted towards a crypto audience of why there's value in tokenizing and bringing real world assets on chain, to now the evolution of education being more focused on treasury managers for DAO treasuries and stable coins and traditional asset managers. And every layer further out we go requires more and more education. So when you think about an asset manager today, oftentimes the blockchain division or the innovation division, there's a couple key people who understand blockchain and crypto, and they are early pioneers in driving adoption of that technology within their firm. But their boss's boss or the CEO or the board, they still need to be educated on the fundamentals and the core characteristics of the technology. As blockchain and crypto is still so early, so is RWAs and tokenization. And we, along with our partners in ecosystem, know the most about RWAs and tokenization. So it's very important for us to pull together our resources and play our part in helping to accelerate the education curve to see broader adoption of the technology.
Yeah, thanks. That sounds really great. And can you share what's still missing in DeFi ecosystem to truly unlock RWAs at scale?
Yeah, so one thing we've made a lot of progress in the last few months is utility and distribution. So historically, it's been a outweighed focus on just tokenizing the asset, bringing it on chain, having a digital version of that, a digital representation of that tokenized asset. But then the question arises of who's the buyer for that? How do we grow demand and distribution of that? And then what's the utilities? What happens once that asset is tokenized? There's been some really strong progress on the utility side recently where RWAs can be used as collateral in lending markets. RWAs can be used as the underlying reserve management for stablecoins. RWAs can be used for baseline stable yields for some of these vault and yield aggregation platforms. That's a big step forward for the industry where you can now integrate RWAs into crypto and DeFi at the same level and scale and expectation as you do with crypto assets. And you can start to see more usage and more growth and more adoption from the RWAs more broadly. So distribution, utility are on the path to being solved. There's a lot of progress that's being made in terms of exchanges and custodians being able to support RWAs and how to think in the industry about the difference between securities and non-security tokens. Of course, RWAs are securities. So a lot of what has been missing in the DeFi ecosystem over the past years to enable the growth of RWAs has and is being solved right now. And then that paired with the regulatory clarity and the institutional demand that we're seeing for tokenization, where a lot of these asset managers and the institutions are following the BlackRocks of the world and the large players who have established that this is legitimate technology, that they're putting their brand and their strategy behind. This is the perfect storm where it's all coming together. And we really expect that 2025 will see this inflection for real world assets, both from the sell side, so more asset managers wanting to come on, and then the buy side of more demand and more interesting uses for those RWAs once they are on chain.
Yeah, thank you. So you think that this BlackRock moment will be this year, right?
Yeah, we do.
You expect
We're seeing it. We're feeling it. I mean, just the number of inbounds that we've received and the interest and the speed at which we're able to progress these conversations that we've had for many, many years has completely turned around since the BlackRock moment.
I know that you won a Spark Tokenization Grand Prix. You were selected among 40 teams. Can you share more about your experience and how did you win this prize?
Yeah, so that was the $1 billion RFP that Spark put out in collaboration with Maker, where they wanted to allocate $1 billion to tokenized T-bills. And what they did was they asked for everyone to submit bids on how their product could bring the best yields, could help grow the Spark and the Sky ecosystem, and bring the best prices and liquidity. So those were the key differentiators in terms of how the various bids were reviewed and evaluated. What we did leading up to that was brought in Janus Henderson as a sub-advisor. So they're a $400 billion asset manager that came in to sub-advise and be the sub-investment manager for our T-bill fund. So we recognized that Centrifuge has incredible technology. We have a lot of precedent and previous work that we've done with Maker and the Sky ecosystem, and where we wanted to improve our chances to win, we're bringing in a really strong counterpart on the TradFi side so that we can have both the DeFi, crypto strategy, vision, integration, utility component nailed, and then also the deep expertise in terms of TradFi asset managers and what it takes to grow and scale a T-bill fund. We're able to bring Janus Henderson in. We were able to put together a really compelling offer for Centrifuge that included integration within Sky, a liquidity network where we can offer an instant redemption facility, and then the power and the experience of Janus Henderson running that fund. We were really excited to be selected as one of 3 winners from 40 different applicants, which really acted as a validation of the importance of all of the pieces that we had in place and the strength of our T-bill fund. Now our T-bill fund AUM is top 5 in the industry, and we're launching another fund with Janus that is actually their flagship strategy for AAA rated CLOs. And we expect that to grow really quickly as well. So for us, it was validation from Maker and the DeFi ecosystem on the strength of our joint offering, but then also validation for Janus and the TradFi ecosystem of seeing fast growth and success of the first fund and then justifying the development and the launch of future funds as well.
That sounds huge. Today, I saw your post that something will happen this week on the Centrifuge side. So, can you give us a teaser, maybe?
We are announcing the JAAA, which is the tokenized strategy for Janus's flagship fund. And alongside that will be the first allocation, which is coming from a new star, previously called SubDAOs within the Sky ecosystem, named Grove, who was spun out from the Steakhouse Financial team. They're launched exclusively to focus on growth on the credit and the RWA side for the Sky Treasury. And they're announcing a $1 billion allocation into the JAAA fund. So that will be the fastest tokenized fund to reach $1 billion. It'll be the first allocation from the Grove side, and it will be incredible validation and pull from the Janus side, and then answering the question of what's next after T-bills. So we expect there to be a lot of demand for JAAA just broadly across the collateral use case for DeFi. And we really are already talking to a number of other stablecoins, yield aggregators, DAO treasuries, on-chain capital allocators that want to start seeing slightly higher yields than what they're getting from their T-bill strategy without much additional risk and without much additional liquidity, duration extensions. We're already pretty far along in terms of how we grow from that initial $1 billion to much sooner, pretty quickly.
Yeah, thanks for this exclusive material. It's super cool, and congratulations.
Thank you. We have a couple other big announcements that we'll be making on stage in Cannes as well. So stay tuned and keep an eye on Centrifuge.
What advice would you give to emerging leaders who want to combine their expertise in traditional finances and in Web3 crypto?
For any Web2 folks interested in getting into crypto, come. It is the most welcoming and engaged and fast-moving and high-caliber innovation and intellect place there is, and we're always welcoming more folks. So we need to grow the talent pool broadly for crypto generally. And there's never been an easier time to learn. Use ChatGPT as your friend. Use, of course, dig into all of the forum posts and documents, and because all of these protocols are open and decentralized, there's so much information you can learn just from doing research and starting to explore and kind of live by a sense of curiosity. And then ChatGPT can become or any AI tool can become your sounding board, can be that, person that you ask the dumb questions to that normally you would have a longer learning curve or have to dig in for hours in terms of finding the answer to those questions you have, but there's really no better source of information and no better opportunity to learn than right now. So don't wait for permission, just start. Pursue what's interesting for you. Join communities, go to local meetups, find folks that you think are saying interesting stuff on Twitter, or Farcaster, or LinkedIn. Reach out, ask questions, recognize the value that you can bring that's unique to the crypto industry, and lean into that so that you're equally contributing as much as you're taking out of it, and helping us all to drive the growth of this industry more broadly, because we won't see mass adoption until we have broader education and understanding and excitement from every type of company, every type of person, every nation within the organization. So we're still so early, and coming in now will get you in on the ground floor and give you a really unique opportunity to help shape the industry and turn it into what we all believe that it can and should be.
What Web3 people should learn from Web2 people?
I think that there's like the most of my experience from the marketing side was that I brought a lot of structure and like operational savviness in terms of how to run an effective outcome-focused company, where a lot of the process and the tools and the cadences that have been developed for Web2 companies are just more mature, even if it's not apples to apples in terms of being able to implement the playbook. There's more data and information and experience that's happened because there's so much more that's happened in Web2. So I think what Web3 can learn from Web2 is like really depends on who the unique person is. So if you come from TradFi, then crypto can learn what are the pain points that you felt firsthand? What are the biggest challenges that you had? What are the weaknesses and that can create opportunities for the work that we're doing today? If you come from marketing and growth and go to market, it's how do we expand the category and the audience and the folks that we're selling into, and how do we scale the work that we're doing? If you come from operations, it's how do you build a really strong operating cadence? So I think based on the person, based on the function, based on the unique experience they have, there's a lot that Web3 can learn, and then vice versa too. There's unique learnings that only folks who've been building crypto for a long time have exposure to, that the new entrants that are coming into crypto will learn from as well. So operating with a sense of trust and respect and collaboration, and recognizing that you have different experience in this realm, in this regard, and they have different experience there. And how do you both learn from each other and respect the fact that both of those experience levels are very important, and the growth of the industry is only going to happen if we band together. It won't get to mainstream if it's just tech driven. It won't get to mainstream if it's just brand and marketing driven. It's the power of both that are working together to bring these companies into the mainstream.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And guys, I hope you liked our conversation, because I really liked it, and I learned much from Bhaji's story and from her advice. So I will leave all the links under this episode to her social media and also to Centrifuge, so we can check out and learn and follow. Thanks for your attention, and see you in the next episode. Bye.
Thanks so much for the great questions. Thanks, everyone. See you hopefully at RWA Summit.